Hello, community, and welcome back to another Keeping It Real with Dr. Nita podcast. I am your host, Dr. Nita Polite Wilson. There's our guest, Rick Girard. Say hi back to Rick. I am the founder and CEO of Dr. Nita Enterprises, and as a C-suite trusted advisor and board director, I help other members of the C-suite community reframe diversity conversations from difficult to different. Unfortunately, this is our last conversation with Rick, but Rick, I want us to just really dig deep into belonging. Help us understand what are the telltale signs of a company that walks the talk in terms of a sense of belonging where everyone can thrive.
I found it's kind of rare actually, right?
Mm.
So companies that have, there's lots of companies that have core values, but like when you are trying to join a company, when you're interviewing or you're like first talking to a company, there should be language in and around their core values in the conversation in which you guys have.
Mm-hmm.
If you get off a phone call with somebody who's trying to get you to come in to interview at their company and they haven't asked you anything about core values, there's a pretty good indicator that they have no idea what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a crapshoot whether or not it's going to be successful for you, first and foremost.
So then if they can't share any core values that even slightly indicate belonging, chances are you're not going to find it there. Is that what I'm hearing?
Most likely.
Yeah.
And then also, they may have them on their website, right? So if they have them on their website, it's kind of your responsibility. If they don't ask or bring it up, it's your responsibility to ask them about it in that phone conversation. Mm-hmm. Tell me about your values. So to me, values are kind of that North Star that companies put in that like allow you to make decisions that are based on those values because that make your decisions defensible.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's empowering to somebody and it sets people up for success to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. Now, again, it's kind of rare because a lot of companies, they just want you to come in and do a job.
Yeah.
And it's okay if that's the case, but they should be talking to you about their values and there should be some sort of language around it, especially if it's a place where like you're not in a place where you need a job, but where you're looking to advance your career.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's a lot of like short-term destinations. I get it. Like maybe for some unfortunate reason you got laid off or, you kind of had to part ways. You need something to get, to feed your family and get a paycheck in. But while you're doing that, you should be like, you may kind of be in that great, you might get lucky and fall into a role where you're in a great place. But if not, then you need to be kind of engaging companies still and talking about like, or finding that place that is going to be that place you're going to thrive.
Yeah. And thriving is so important. You mentioned that in early conversations, if they don't mention values, ask. And I know that when I am talking to potential clients, they're interviewing me. I'm interviewing them just as hard. As a matter of fact, before the first conversation, I'm on their website. I'm looking at their values. I'm checking out their pictures of who they're posting. And I'm looking at their executive team. And oftentimes still what executive teams consider to be diversity is more women, but it's still faces that look like you versus faces that look like me. And so even an honest conversation around that to say we're not where we want to be, that's just as important too. For someone who's hiring on, other than core values, other than looking at the website, what are some other indicators that says they really mean it? And here's why I'm asking this question. Oftentimes, especially since 2020 and George Floyd's death in May, a lot of companies were getting on the bandwagon. We're all about it. We're changing our languaging. We're doing this. We're doing that. We're bringing on chief diversity officers. But the chief diversity officer is a revolving door because either it's a figurehead or they're not given staff or they're not giving funds to actually do the work. Or back to what you said earlier in your book about not being a yes man, when you bring things to people's attention really to make the company better, but they really don't want to hear it, that's where we get to the revolving door. Yeah. So what are the other indicators that we might look for that says this really is a place where I can potentially feel a sense of belonging, not just to belong, but to belong in a company where I'm doing my efforts as a career person to benefit the company so that we're doing this together as a team?
Wow, that's a lot. There's a lot there to unpack.
Mhm.
So, like, I mean, first, I think what's important is that you ask yourself what it is that you desire, right? So, do I want to be a place where I'm just kind of going in, doing my work, and I've got a job to support my lifestyle and my family and everything,
Yeah.
or do I want to be in a place where I love my work and I want to be able to grow in that and support my family, right? So it kind of depends on that place of positioning. Um, where is it in? You ask yourself that question as to where you're going to thrive,
Mhm.
right? I think it's important that you understand that. Then, I think the short answer is that um, see, the diversity thing is like is trendy, right? And like you said, like I see what companies are doing just to kind of get some of the heat off of them, but it's
Right.
not real.
Right.
Um, but I don't think you have to worry about that with smaller companies. Like you do see diversity, and I think it's diversity of thinking more so than in different backgrounds, but under the same values that kind of make that a cohesive environment. Um,
I want to talk about diversity of thinking because oftentimes, again, clients tell me where we think diversely and we have diverse solutions. Again, the diversity can't be diversity in the thinking of white males. It's got to be
yeah,
diversity in the thinking also of the people that think differently and their
yeah,
backgrounds and their lived experiences that give them that richness in the thinking.
yeah. So it's funny because I don't really know what it means really, and I don't think a lot of people know what it means. I don't really know what that means, and I don't think anybody's really defined that out. I think it's important to not. I think what's most important is you just don't let your bias come in against people when you're interviewing them, and you hire them based on the fact that doesn't matter what they look like, how old they are, you know, what their situation is. What matters is, does this person align with our values, and do they have the capacity to do well in the job?
Right. And you're not necessarily not hiring them because of what they can't do, you're hiring them because of what they can do.
Yeah,
So let's
yeah,
talk about this. Are other companies struggling with this? Because you said it's kind of hard to define. Is this part of the challenge that other companies are like, they're so careful not to tick a box, yet at the same time, they're not quite sure how to go about this work?
yeah. I mean, I feel like it's a bigger company issue more so than because they're under the microscope, right? Because once you have a lot of employees, or maybe you're public, then you have a lot of people who kind of push back on it.
Right.
Smaller companies are struggling just to get people.
Right.
You right? So, to the momentum of, startup founders are kind of like, look at, I got somebody who said yes. I don't care what they look like or what's going on, right?
Yeah.
I got somebody who's really buying into it, and I think they're going to do well. So I don't see it really as being a problem, or even we don't have too many conversations about it in my search business, because again, I think it's more about like we need somebody who really wants what we have to offer,
Yeah.
and has the capacity to do the work and thrive in this environment. And
Hmm.
that's really those are really the things that are important to them more so than anything else. So I
And I
see a
think,
lot less screening out because of, I've yet to, I don't really have like, yeah, we don't want somebody who's in their 40s, or, we don't want somebody who grew up here. It just doesn't happen. I don't see those conversations that much.
and I
And I
think
also work in tech where there's just a lot of diversity anyway. Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And I think the benefit probably of smaller companies, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but based on the sense that I get from our conversation, the benefit in the smaller companies is because they do just want the people that are going to do the work. It might be easier to start cultivating that sense of belonging because we just want to get, to your point, the people that can do the work.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, I think we all want the same thing, right? We want to be in a place where we're happy. We want to have people who are happy. Um, and as a company, like, it's your responsibility as a leader to make sure that that company thrives.
Hmm.
That's really all in. so the way to make it thrive is to not have a lot of these barriers that are kind of being put up, um, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was an excellent conversation. Rick, I want to thank you for joining me and for sharing your expertise with our community. Again, I want to mention the fact that you are the founder and CEO of Stride Search and your book, Healing Career Wounds. Give us one last thing that you want everyone to think about, not just the size company that you work with, but from the size company you work with to the larger companies, because we've talked about all different types of companies in our conversation. What's the one takeaway that you have for our listeners? And then how can they reach out to you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, most definitely. So, God, the one thing, you know, I, I feel if you're a job seeker, you should 100% judge companies based on the interview and try to seek out companies you align with from a values perspective.
Yeah.
And if you're an entrepreneur, you own a company, I think it's really important that you take the time to sit down with your leaders and really define out what your values are, and then start building a language around it by which people can start defending and operating within the organization. It makes your life so much easier as an executive. So to find me, I'm on LinkedIn, and then I also host a podcast and radio show called Higher Power Radio, and it's not a religious show. It's about hiring. So it's HIRE Power POWER Radio RADIO.com.
And it's a great show, wonderful resource.
Thank you. Yeah, and I take everything from the perspective. I think the biggest problem is companies just don't know a lot of things. We just don't know about. We're just trying to get a business off the ground. Mm-hmm. And so if we can help companies hire much stronger people that kind of benefit both parties, then the chances of success, I mean, just think of the innovation and the chances of success that smaller companies can move the needle, at least. Mm-hmm. Because so many companies fail because it's the wrong person in the wrong seat.
That's right. Healing Career Wounds. Community, this is a really good read. And I just want to share the initial thoughts that I had when I first started reading this book. First of all, when I saw the title, I was just intrigued, Healing Career Wounds. But then when I read about the fact that the pain is really based on what we are or not getting from work, and how leaders do or don't get it the first time around, what came to mind was the fact that there's privilege in pain. And I want you to stay with me for just a few more seconds. There's privilege in our pain because when we think about the pain that we have endured, either at work or just in life, the fact that we are on the other side of that can give us insight into the ways we were treated, so that moving forward, we make sure that we don't treat anyone else in the ways that caused us our pain. That being said, I want you to think about that as a leader. When we're talking about healing career wounds, make sure that you lead people in a way that does not add to their career wounds. And we talked about the differences between leaders investing the time to listen and managers who don't. Please be a leader. Invest in listening to your people. Find out what those career wounds are. We're not asking you to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist. We're saying listen, meet people where they are, and meet the need so that you can walk through the journey in the workplace together. Wow, community, thank you so much for joining me for another Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita. If you want to hear this conversation again, Real Conversations from the C-Suite with Rick Girard, please go to the website, dranita.com. On the landing page in the center at the top, click the link that says Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita podcast. In the meantime, please subscribe, like, and share. If this conversation helped you reframe diversity from difficult to different, that's the point. Share it with your friends. Until next time, this is Dr. Anita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real. Yeah.
So, aspirational values don't work. If we want to have that was the point behind, somebody pulled some values from an author that they made that their core values. And I'm like, well, one of them is be humble. And I'm like, are you really humble? And he's like, well, not really. I mean, like, well, okay, so you want everybody else to be humble, but you're not humble. So do you see where there's a problem here? And so
Well,
it just
well,
downgrades.
wait a minute. Let's stop. So aspirational means that's what I aspire to be, right? So if
Yes.
one of our
No, that's
values
what he
is
aspires
humility,
everybody else to be.
but the point is, if it's aspirational and we put humility, I know that right now I'm not humble, but I aspire to be that, and I want everyone that works with me to be that. How come we still can't use that?
Well, it's dangerous because if you're not living it and you're doing things that are not humble, then you're sending the message that, you know what, do as I say, not as I do, which,
Yes.
nobody wants that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then
Yeah.
you just basically crushed all your values.
Yes. And
Right.
because leaders are not living the values, right? There's the stated values that are on the wall and the demonstrated values that we do or don't see in
Yeah.
alignment with the stated values. Now, and Rick, I want us to go back to a conversation that you and I had a few weeks ago when we were just generally talking about corporate toxicity and the fact that this stuff happens at the top and leaders know it, but because they're not role modeling, then it just kind of seeps throughout. And that really does great detriment to the corporate culture, especially in terms of belonging.
I think all bad behavior filters down.
Yeah.
Right. So like it comes from the top first.
Mm.
I've yet to see companies where like the CEOs like just like really well put together, like runs values, lives values, talks about it, has a language about it, and then where everybody else is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen a lot of organizations where like they'll say like they'll have corporate values that they pay some HR firm like a lot of money to develop for them, which are not even remotely close to being true. And then they'll say like, oh, we're team based and we're all about teamwork. And then come to find out it's like every man for himself, and we'll stab you on the back like when you go to the bathroom. Like
Yeah.
that should be your value. There's nothing wrong with that value. By the way, that is a great, like, just to your point earlier, if we are a hunter kill all, like, backstabbing environment, you should have that on your website because people thrive. There are people that thrive in that environment.
There are.
You know where you get in trouble is when you hire somebody who like believes that you're really a teamwork based environment,
Yeah.
and they're buying into that.
Yeah.
And then they come in and then now it's a hostile environment.
Yeah.
But
And,
it's not a hostile environment for somebody who loves that.
exactly. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm really suppressing the laughter over here, because could you imagine if the corporate values on the wall were backstabbing, lying, cheating, first man, every man for himself. And then because we know people that live by that, they say one thing, but we see them doing something else.
Yeah.
But could you imagine a corporation that just, these are our values, like it or lump it. If you're with it, come on. If you're not, we're not the place for you.
I
What
would love
kind of
that. By the way,
organization would that be?
that's usually like every company on Wall Street, right? So like you would think that one of them would embrace it. And I'm hoping I want to do more podcasts just so I can get that message out. And one of them does it.
Well, you know what? I tell you what, we're going to pick up the next conversation. You can share whatever you like, but community, this was great. I love the way this ended. We're having fun with this, but it's something to really think about. If you're not living your corporate values, don't think people can't see it. They can't.